Good evening. I know it's a little bit past 6:30. We're going to go ahead and get started, and others may join us. But I do want to go ahead and get started with our program for tonight because our goal is to stick to our timeline, which is from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. And we do have 2 breakout sessions today and plenty of time to answer questions. So our agenda is as follows. We're going to talk briefly about an overview of the park, and then we're going to break up into 2 breakout sessions. And those of you that were here last time know how the breakout sessions work. I'll divide you into 2 groups. Last time it was 3. This time we're going to do 2 groups. One group will start in here and we'll do a discussion of concerns, issues, test logistics, etc. in here. And the other group will go into the library and the computer lab and go through the test tutorial, the tools that the students will use, and some sample questions. And then we will switch those 2 groups. And the second group will come in here and we'll do a question answer. And then we come back at the end, and it's not going to be a whole group discussion. We'll be sitting at different tables here around the room. So if your questions were not answered in the 2 breakout sessions, you can come to any of us at the table and ask individual questions at that time. I think we know that what's in the room here, so I've heard the same things you have. So I just want to address it right off the bat. I know there are a lot of concerns, and we're probably here for probably 2 main reasons. Probably one, that we want information about the test and how this is going to impact our students, just because we don't know a lot about the test and it's brand new. The second is that you may have some individual issues or concerns that you want addressed, and so I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to do that today. Our goal for the day is to talk about the test, address those concerns, but really we won't be able to get into your individual student issues. I will be glad to contact you after the evening if you have a particular issue that's just to your student, or if there's time at the end, please find me or any of the administrators and we can answer your individual questions. Hopefully in the large group we can address those general concerns that probably many people have. One of the things I know that has come up a lot, I've had a few questions that I'm just going to answer right off the bat, so that hopefully then we can focus on what is the test like and how is that going to impact your child. I know that the questions have been about the refusals. If you feel that this is not right for your child or your family, what are the procedures? After our presentation tonight, the procedures will be listed on the website. But what will occur is if you decide that you're going to refuse the test, it is not an opt-out. The state requires that we administer the test by law. We do not have the authority as a Board of Education to grant students the permission to opt out, just as we don't have the authority to say, stay home for a few days, it's fine. We don't have that authority because it is a legal document. However, a parent has the right to refuse to have their student take the assessment. And so we do have procedures in place. The difference for the child is the same. They wouldn't be taking the test. But the implications between us granting permission versus a parent enacting their rights is different. The 2 options that you would have is that your student would either, 1, stay at home until after the test is over, which is about an hour and a half. They would come in after that time. It would be an excused tardy, and they would have enough hours in the day because we will resume our instruction right after the testing. It's not a full day testing. It's not even a half day testing. The longest test there is 1 day is an hour and a half. The rest are an hour. So the education will just resume and they'll still do all their math, science, and so forth the rest of the day. The second option would be that you bring them in at the regular time. However, they would go into a designated location and just read silently while the others are testing. And then as soon as the test is over, they will go back into the room and, again, resume their regular educational day. We would not require them to do that during the makeup testing. That's just for the initial testing week. And the same is true for both the performance-based as well as the end-of-the-year exam. Same thing would follow. What I want to do tonight is kind of listen about what the test is like and really think about your questions or concerns. Hopefully we can answer and alleviate some of those concerns for you, because what we really hope is that you do decide to take this assessment. The implications for the children, there are no penalties. We do not use this assessment for any placement in any course. not for advanced math or language arts in the middle school, not for gifted and talented programs, not for any placement. What we use this assessment for is to gather information, and more information on this assessment than we've ever been able to do before, to help guide their instruction. So although they may choose not to take the test, then we lose out on that valuable information to guide some of our instruction in class. The implications for the district, because this was another question that came up, is that we are required to meet a target of 95% participation. This has always been the case. This has not come up because of parents having the right to refuse. It actually came up in the law because of concern for students, that districts couldn't hide students that they didn't think would do well on the assessment. You can't keep them from taking the test. So it really was done to protect students that may or may not do well on the assessment. It never was directed to whether or not parents could refuse to take the test, but that's why that law exists. For us then, if we do not meet that target, it's reported on the school report card that you see on the websites and in the newspaper that we didn't meet our targets. And the financial implication could be to remove our federal funding, which we use. And that's an if. They don't even guarantee that that is going to happen. But those are the implications that would happen for us. There is no implication for the student if they decide to refuse. So we'll talk more about that issues and concerns when we get to the breakout session. But in general, I just want you to be able to listen and ask questions about what the test is like and what the experience will be for your student. So some just basics, just go right from the top first. I know that we all know different amounts of information about the PARCC. Some of us have read online, some of us have investigated, and some it's brand new. PARCC stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, and that's where the letters come from. It's a statewide assessment, and it is just replacing the NJAS that we've been taking for the last decade. It is taken for us, it's in grades 3 through 8. There are grade levels in the high school as well. So it does not affect kindergarten, first, or second grades. It is taken on the computer. Some students may have accommodations that they take it on paper, but the majority of our students are taking it on the computer. It is administered in 2 phases. Unlike the NJASC, where we took the test for several hours a day for an entire week, it's broken up into 2 sections. The first section occurs in March, and that's the performance-based assessment. That includes any question that is covered, that would require a student to give an open response. So any of their essay writing or any of their open answer math questions will be in March. The end of the year assessment are only either multiple choice or drag and drop. There's no open-ended question where they are required to actually write in a response. The end of the year is taking place the same time that NJASC has always taken place. I know it's not exactly the end of the year, but it's the very last few days in April, and then we have the whole month of May to administer it. But it's more similar to the New Jersey Ask than the performance-based one is. Currently, this year in the spring, there will be 12 states that are going to be administering the PARCC. That represents 5 million students, and that's nearly 15% of grades 3 through 11. And about 3 in 4 will take it on the computer. So although I went to a training and with members from all over the country, and some were telling me how they were doing it paper, the majority of the students taking the test this year are on the computer. So why are we moving to a new test? Because NJASC we've had for quite a long time, and we're very familiar with it. There are some reasons. We have new standards that were adopted in 2010, and although last year's NJASC they tried to change some of the questions to mirror the new Common Core, it really was never intended to meet those standards. So they needed to rewrite the test to align to the new standards. NJASC was also not designed to be a diagnostic tool. It was designed with NCLB all of that time to hold school districts accountable for their students. The reports that went home were never really intended to guide instruction in the classroom, and so the questions weren't written that way, the test format isn't that way, the information we get back was was helpful, but somewhat limited. Also, the timeline, we would get back in the fall, didn't necessarily help us forward. So they knew that if they were going to make this a diagnostic tool, they needed to rewrite the assessment. It also provides more detailed information than the New Jersey Ask did. And I'm going to show you a sample report of what you're going to get for your students tonight so that you can see how it's different and how much more information you would be able to get from it. And also it is the next evolution of testing. I would say probably over the last decade, but definitely in the last 5 years, we've seen just an increase between social media and the media in general about this quest for knowledge, that everyone is really data hungry about information, very specific information about their children. Teachers want very specific information. It's really not just the general information of a letter grade in a class. People want to know more specifics. We find that our parents ask more detailed questions at conferences, not about like behaviors, but more about how, specifically how are they reading, how are they comprehending, how is their fluency. As parents have become more informed, they want that information from us as well. So as that has happened, we have seen tests evolve. All of us took those Scantron tests from CAT, and we didn't do anything for it. We sat down at a desk and there was the Scantron, there was a test. We don't probably even see what the results were, our parents may have. But it has evolved over 40 years of testing, that things have really evolved to be more diagnostic and more individualized. And that is a piece of that. The PARCC names these as their goals. That in the past, we've given tests that, if you've had students who've already taken NJASC, they came home, they might have told you the prompt, but the students weren't really into the prompt. They didn't really want to write about that topic. It wasn't interesting. They might not have any experiences to draw back on. So this has changed, that we'll choose texts that are worth reading and give prompts and tasks that are worth writing about. Accessible, meaning on the computer, kind of moving to where our generation is. They are tech natives and they do a lot of their work and prefer to do a lot on computers. So kind of moving, using the tools that they are being more comfortable with. It gives us, or our intent is that we would get more valid, reliable, and timely data. And this year we'll talk about the timeline, because the data this year is not going to come back to us until October, the same timeline as New Jersey Ask, but in the future it's going to look different. Some of these I've already talked about, like what's the purpose of the PARCC, and their goal is to determine if students are on track for career and college readiness. And this is coming down from universities and businesses telling us information. And in New Jersey, community colleges are reporting that 70% of their incoming freshmen have to take remedial courses in their freshman year before they're ever allowed to take any credit-bearing classes. It's about 25% of the students at Rutgers also reported having to take remedial classes. And as a parent who would be paying for college, that's a year of payment that doesn't even count. So a 2-year AA degree now becomes a 3-year degree, possibly, because you have to take those remedial courses that do not count towards your degree. That information coming down saying students aren't ready to do college-level work has also filtered down, and that high school is saying, well, we can't prepare them in a few years. That's filtered down to middle school, need to be at a certain place, filtered down to where elementary schools need to be to get them ready. If you just have a third grader, you're probably not thinking about how is this affecting my senior in high school. But those of you that have high school students, you are. Okay? Because this is going to be their reality. And our students coming through elementary, it is their reality. That when they get there, they need to be able to write essays, they need to be able to do nonfiction and be able to provide evidence. Any of you that have your own businesses know when you hire people, you're looking for those qualities in a candidate, and that's what we would want to prepare our students when they leave Denville. For the first year, the only piece of the PARCC assessment system we're getting is this down here, this end of the year assessment and the performance base. The intent of this is that it would be a year-long assessment system, that it's going on regularly in their instruction, and these first parts would be formative, that we would get information, diagnostic information to help in the classroom, none of this being reported outside of the building, or outside of the school district. We would use this to prepare them to see how are we doing, what interventions do we need to put into place, where do we need to enrich these students and push them forward, and this would go on. We currently do this, but we have purchased other resources to do these diagnostic tests, or we have written our own, because we need this information. We need to know how to move students forward, because they're all at different places, and we want to move them wherever they are. This piece here, the summative piece, is what we are doing this year. This part here is not available to us yet. In the future, when this becomes available, it may then be able to replace some of the resources and the finances that we've been putting out for this, because there would be no cost to us at that point. These are the two that we do in-house, that we do out in-house and then report out to the state. In your folder, there's a copy of this report. And when we move into our discussion group, I'm going to talk about this in detail. But I'm just going to show you briefly how different the report is going to look for your students. There's a lot more information that is going to tell your teacher, and there are all sorts of samples of way that it's broken out to the teacher so they can really look at how are they helping each student individually. It's going to give you a lot of information about how many points they got on each question, and when you click on it, it even tells you what type of question it was. So you can get more information as opposed to the reports in the past where we just sort of got a general score of language arts, math, and some cluster data. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when we break out in our groups. So that is the overview of the test, and I'm going to talk again in more detail in our breakouts. But the test, when it's going to be occurring, and what the ramifications are for your students. We'll talk about your issues and concerns in just a few minutes. We're going to break up, and I think we're pretty evenly broken up in the room. So I think we'll have, except for keep the first 3 rows here, and everybody else in the 4th row on. I'm going to have you guys start in the library to do the test nav and the tutorial and the practice tests, and then you're going to return back here about 7:15, 7:20, I guess we'll be at 7:20. And then you'll be here for the discussion part. And then everybody here, we're going to stay for the discussion piece. So if we can go ahead and switch, and if you want to get a quick drink or snack before you move on. What's that? If you guys want to move up closer, so we can hear talk a little bit more about the test specifically and what your child is going to experience during the test. And then we're going to open it up to discuss some issues or concerns that you may have. And we're going to kind of record some of the concerns. That way, if we have more than one person with the same concern, we can address it at one time. Okay, so we'll start back with that report. Do you have your copies? The first thing you notice is different is in the past we've had 3 levels of proficiency. It's been partially proficient, proficient, and advanced proficient. There will now be 5 levels of proficiency. The numbers on this chart say 150 to 230. We know it's going to be an 80-point scale. However, we don't know if it's going to be 200 to 280 or 150 to 230. We don't know what the range is going to be. They're actually going to wait and get the test results back, and there's a large panel that is going to look at them to see the spread to make sure that they are echoing the same types of results that they're seeing in other tests that have been used for years and proved to be valid, like SATs, ACTs. So just wanted to make sure that the percentage of students that are falling in that range are similar to some other standardized assessments. The other piece, other piece of information that you have here, on the bottom, you'll get 5 different numbers back about your students. I don't have my glasses, I got it closer here. You're going to see how they do in the district, how they do in the school, how they do in the state, and how they do against all the other PARCC states as well. It will be put on a range up here at the top, whatever these numbers end up being, and whatever the titles end up being, because they haven't decided what they're going to call levels 1 through 5 yet either. Each of these levels, you can see, are different sizes, because unlike in the past where students kind of were about the same percentage fell into each category, it's not necessarily going to be so. We're probably be more like a bell curve that we'll see what we would expect is that fewer students would probably be in level 1 and 5, and majority of the students would be at 2, 3, and 4, the proficient levels. Proficiency will be 3, 4, and 5, but students, especially the parents that have older students in the high school that get a 4 or a 5 on the assessment will not have to take the AccuPlacer for college. They will not have to take any remedial classes. Those states that have universities in the PARCC states, which are actually 20, will automatically take those scores and they don't have to take any remedial courses. They'll go right into credit-bearing classes if they receive a 4 or 5. The PARCC is most likely not going to be the only thing that they take in high school, because looking at if you take an AP course, then you probably don't have to take the PARCC. They're looking at other things. If you score a certain amount on the SAT, then you may not have to. They're going to give you some choices in high school. You will also find out how you range, and we'll find out on the certain areas how they do. So this is an example of a math report. So not only will you get a math score, you're going to get 4 or 5 subcategories under each category, under each subject area. So at the beginning of the year, I gave all of the teachers a breakout of the Common Core that says what percentage of time they should spend on which category. So about 75% of the year in grade 4 should be on certain topics. And then the rest of the time are spent on some supporting topics. And that is done so that every year we don't keep covering the same things over and over, and then we don't get to certain topics. And the idea is fewer topics each year, but in more depth. They're going to tell you how your student did on the major content area and also on the supporting. So not just how they did overall, but they'll break it down. They'll also break out how they're doing in mathematical reasoning, as well as the modeling and application. So you'll get more information about the subcategories. Again, you'll also get the individual scores on each question and what type of question that is. The teachers get this digitally, so they can actually, color codes the students so they can see which areas students had math reasoning. That they know they have to either target or enrich certain students based on that. That's only one piece of data, but it is a piece of data for that. We use other materials as well. And this will be combined with their end of year. So you'll only get one report, but it will combine both things together. The testing time. Although there are 2 testing times, the actual amount of testing is about the same or as it would have been the NJ Ask, but we break it down. So the first testing here in March, they take over 5 days, but the longest they're allowed is an hour and a half, and the rest are about an hour of tests. So they take an hour of testing in the morning, and then they move on to their regular instructional day. So the performance-based, there are 3 writing units. So all of these are the tasks where they have to either read a narrative piece or an informational piece, and for the literary essay or a research task, those are essays, and then the narrative is like writing a story. So that's what they're doing that day. They're reading, and they're writing, and they're using the evidence. They don't have to develop it in their head. They're using the evidence that they are given. So it covers both the reading and the writing on those pieces. And then the math are more of the open-ended pieces. So they do 2 days of math. The end of year, for 3, 4, and 5, it's 3 days, not 5, 3 days. They do only 1 language arts, and this is like reading comprehension questions where they read a passage and answer, very similar to the kinds of tests that you've seen in the past, where they pull out a vocab word and ask you what's the meaning in context. These are all multiple choice questions, but there's 1 day of that, and there are 2 math sections. And these, again, are not open-ended. They're doing different types of math problems at that time. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade have 2 days of the language arts and 2 days of math for the older kids. And I know you can't see this very well, but you can see this presentation will be on the website. I just wanted to give you an idea about time. Is in your way, sorry. Give you an idea about time. So here are the tests. So they're broken down in the math, and you can see these are the times that students are given. So it ranges from 75 here, 70, 60, 75, 90 for the research task, because they have to read 3 things and write an essay. But with this column here is what they expect the students to take based upon the pilot, how long students took. And so you can see here that the only one that lasted even an hour expected was the research simulation. If your child has an accommodation, or they've had accommodations in the past with the 504 or an IEP on NJASC, the same accommodation will be for the park. It's unlimited time if that's in their 504 or IEP. So don't worry about the times here. The end of year, it's the same. There are no sections, though, that are an hour long. They're like an hour and 15 minutes. And that's for the middle school. So again, I just want to show you that there's shorter times, but it's like you take one test a day, maybe like a midterm or a final, take the test, and then they move on to the regular classes. So they'll still go to specials, they'll go to do their science or social studies, they'll just move on to the rest of their day with that. And that is what I have for that. Now we're going to open for discussion. And I have some note takers that maybe if you want to share what your concern is, and maybe a short statement that we can write down, and then we can address those concerns. Do you have any?
How would you expect a third grader to write comprehension essay on a computer if they're teaching training going on?
His question was, how are the third graders, how's our expectation of third graders to do it on the computer? A couple of things. I can tell you that we are doing typing, but they're not proficient typers. And my concern isn't even as much the typing as it's a new experience to compose on a computer. As adults, and even probably most high schoolers do all of their composing on the computer. But as children, younger children, they've been doing it on paper. So we have been practicing on the computer, able to compose on a computer. They're actually really good at hunting and pecking surprisingly faster than we would think. When we have done some of our other assessments online, that has not been the issue. Like the students have not had difficulty with navigating the computer. Actually, I think the teachers and the administrators had more trouble navigating the tools. They were showing us like, oh, it's easy, just grab this highlighting tool and you highlight it. So far the students haven't proven in class that they've had a lot of difficulty with it, but it is something that we're aware of. And it's an issue, and I think we definitely need to keep that on our mind because that's something we can control. We can make sure that our computer and technology in classrooms, students have experience with that.
If I could speak to that,
Yes,
as
please
a
do.
building principal here, I know for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers, all the students do something called an on-demand writing piece, which means that maybe before a writing unit, you might expect a kid to do a baseline, essay, or just see developmentally where they are, take a look at that piece against a rubric to see where we need to design our instruction to improve on some weaknesses that we see in that baseline piece. Some teachers are bringing in laptops. We have some laptops on carts within each of the buildings. So they might have, instead of having kids do an on-demand writing piece on paper, hey, do the on-demand writing piece on the computer. Because the one thing we have to be careful with is when we're talking about an essay on the computer, it is not, as you know, simply taking a rough draft and, all right, let me type the final draft. It's generating your piece on the computer. That you are generating it on the computer. So we want to give those children enough experiences, and that those are just a couple of techniques that I know walking around the building I've seen some teachers exposing the children to.
Yes.
I want to know if they are being trained on those devices in which they'll be taking the test, because typing in a laptop is different from typing in a MacBook as against your desktop.
So using the device that they're familiar with. Oh, sorry, Larry. All of the students will be taking them on, they're HPs, but they're either the laptop, I think they're all on laptops. No iPads, no MacBooks, no Google Chromebooks. So the only thing we're practicing with, or we're using every day in just regular instruction, are the are the laptops for typing. We do use the iPads for movie making and some other apps that we do, but not for our word processing and our composing. On the test, every student will have a mouse, should they choose to. Most of the younger students seem to go right to the little, the pad right on the front. Most of them use that. But they all have a mouse and they all have earphones too, headphones. Because if they have a question, they want the directions repeated, they just have to click on it and it repeats for them what the directions are. Yes?
You mentioned that the test doesn't affect anything for the student in terms of placement.
Yes.
Is that scheduled to change next year or at some point in the future? I mean, I know the NJASC made a difference.
That is, in the future, we have no plans to use it for that. We want to use it for diagnostic purposes only. I think it's the 4th PASS meeting, we're going to be talking about our gifted talent and enrichment, and we're changing the identification process, so it will not be part of the placements, whether it's advanced classes, remedial classes, basic skills, it won't be. I mean, we'll look at that data for sure, because it's a piece of data, but it's not one of the identifiers.
So the information, let's say if a student's in 4th grade, is not really going to be used for themselves for 5th grade teacher to identify them and their needs. Is it more like for the instruction of the 4th grade year? In other words, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Once both pieces are there, the fall piece, which is kind of the diagnostic piece that doesn't leave the building, then we can measure growth when we get it back, because we're supposed to get it back in June. This year we're not. So we would get that back at the end of the year, so we could really look and see how those students in that grade did. Because the test changes every year, because the standards change every year. So you're right. Although it helps us in general in the next grade to say, okay, they're struggling with reasoning, or they're doing really well in reasoning, we want to challenge them there. Because they're different standards, it doesn't necessarily carry over grade to grade. Because a student may do amazing in algebra and not do well in geometry, on the geometry skills, even in elementary. Yes?
Did you say for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it's 4 days or 5 days?
The March testing is 5, and in the spring, the May testing is 4.
But you said 2 language arts and 2 math, right? Is that for
Yes, 2 language arts and 2 math for 6, 7, and 8. And in the first performance-based, it's 3 language arts and 2 math. Because there's a different essay every day. They write an informative essay, a research task, then they write a literary essay, and then they write a narrative story.
Thank you.
So they do have a pretty lengthy time. It's longer than they normally write in class, because normally they write just in a period, not an hour. Yes.
I had a question back. You had mentioned there would be potential penalties towards the school if we didn't meet the 95% participation rate. And I was under the impression that New Jersey had the waiver for the No Child Left Behind law, where that would only apply if you were considered a priority or focused school. And in that case, even in that case, the state wouldn't take away your funding. They would say, listen, 30% of your funding really needs to go to school improvements.
Well, how it works is that if we don't meet our targets, you'll see in the report card, it will say we didn't meet certain targets, and the targets will be academic achievement and then also participation. We labeled as if you don't meet a certain number of targets, we're labeled as a school in needs of improvement, which means that we meet with the county regular basis doing action plans, and they have the right to pull our funding. I know it sounds crazy that schools that are improvement would need more funding, but that's not the case. That's one of the possible implications.
So even though you could provide data that says we didn't meet participation due to refusal rate versus failing rate, they could still pull funding from you.
The only guidance they have given us at this time is that, they've listed these are the implications. They have not said which ones they would do. They wouldn't say anything else. They aren't giving us any more information about that, except these are the things that could possibly happen. I just want to let people know that, and not as a scare tactic, because, that's something we're concerned about. You have to make a decision for you and your child. I want to be clear that there's no individual ramification for your child. However, someone did email me and ask me what are the implications for the school district, because they see different information online about what happens. We don't exactly know. We do know that if you don't meet the target, because it's the same as what currently exists, if we don't meet the target, we go at a school of needs improvement, and we're just not usually that district because we meet our targets.
Before you mentioned that the results of this test
out completely, what are the implications for the student at that point?
Well, the fourth PASS meeting we're going to be talking about, and it'd be great to get input from anyone who's interested. We are changing the identification process, that it's going to look like a three-prong approach. One would be testing information not from PARCC, one would be classroom performance, one could be recommendations. I mean, there's lots of other options besides the PARCC to identify students. We use the COGAT as a screener, and we use something called the SAGES, which is it's a test that's normed on gifted and talented students or a certain specific IQ. And we use a variety, but that's going to be changing. So if you want input, the fourth meeting, come to that meeting.
And then what
Yes.
what if they've gone out and tested and followed that?
Well, there are three prongs, so there's different avenues in which students could be identified.
No, I'm not saying for identification for gifted and talented, I'm saying.
For the PARCC?
In general, they take the PARCC and they get whatever the lowest end of the score is. What happens to that student?
We take that, if a student does not do well on the PARCC, if we get this back, because this is the first time we've taken this. I mean, if there's any time to take a trial on this, it'd be now. Because everybody's in the same boat. This is new for us. And we'll take the information and combine it with what we know about your student in class, their grades, all of their benchmarks, everything that they do, and look to see, does your student need assistance in this area, or do they need enrichment in this area? I mean, it's just one piece of data. It doesn't hold them back. They go on to the next grade level just as they would. It's another piece of data for us to look at.
Can I add to that one?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay,
It's
please.
very similar to when we had NJS in the past. We could get a child who scored, bottom 2, 3, 4 in the entire district. We never kept them back from going to the next grade level or anything like that. But where it did help us was we had, oh my gosh, Sally got a 182 on NJS in language arts literacy. First we look at, where did they score low? Was it the writing, the reading? We try to break it down like that. But then, we go to the classroom teacher. Did they have experiences in the classroom where they struggled as well? Does the child benefit maybe from a basics? Because I'm going by NJS. Okay, the PARCC is going to be new for everybody. But, so looking at the scores and designing program and designing instruction and things like that, that's something that we've done, we've been doing for a number of years now. So it's now a matter of using the information. And it looks like PARCC is going to give us more information than we've ever gotten before, like NJS. So I think it's going to be even more helpful.
So it's going to help, good or bad, for the curriculum for the school as a whole, as opposed to the individual students getting something out of it? Or
I think it's going, from what I've seen and from that score report, I think it's going to give us much more information about the child, and also just give us more detailed information about, all right, what exact standards did they struggle with? They struggle in more about the measurement and the data. Like NJS, they broke down into the clusters. And you were always still wondering, within that cluster, it covers so much area. But when I see these score reports and the potential that they have, it could give us more information to even more help needs of the kids based on those results.
We will even, on the classroom, you can even sort them by standard. So it would play out like, okay, these students have these standards. They need to work on these standards. It helps with differentiation. Yes, and then I'll come here.
Just to add to that, what I understand is COGAT and the SAGE, we normally take it in the second grade and then in the fifth grade. And if it normally continues in the gifted talented, if they clear the COGAT and the SAGE for the third, fourth, and fifth. And just for them to go from the third to fourth, the NJS, you need to be advanced proficient in one of either the language arts or maths.
Right.
So now how is it going to?
Well, we haven't come up with the new identification process. However, it would continue. So if there is, whatever we decide, it won't be like only second graders and fifth graders are affected. It would, if a third grader falls into that category, they would continue on in fourth grade.
Right.
So whatever we decide, they'll get to. It just won't, they won't be using the NJS.
Now,
And even to remain.
Yeah, I mean, the kid is in fourth grade, is a gifted talent program. But right at this point, their NJS scores in fourth grade is what makes them go to fifth grade. So they don't take the COGAT again in fourth grade.
Yes.
So what would be the?
So we'll have other criteria to make sure that, as a student doing well in the program, are they able to produce whatever the products are that are required for that class? We'll look at.
Right now it was NGR, so
Right.
have you identified what that criteria is going to be?
We have not, no.
Is it going to be PAR or?
It will not be PARCC. I don't think at this point we have enough information of what the results are going to be. I mean, I think that a lot of the questions and fear that I have seen on the internet is because there's some trust issues. Is this going to be a quality test? What are you going to do with the data? How is the data going to be used? I mean, it's a matter of the same kinds of trust issues that we had with NJ Ask really haven't gone away. I mean, they just carried over to a new test, and I completely understand it. I have 3 of my own children, 2 of which will be taking the test, and I'm so thankful that you come out to get information about the assessment. Oh, sorry, Samantha.
So if I remember from the last session, there was a lot more states doing Common Core. Am I correct in that?
Right.
How many states?
43.
Okay, so now there's 31 states, right? Is my math? I'm so tired. Maybe I should go back to Common Core. 31 states that are not doing PARCC.
That's correct. There's a few reasons. Right now, there are 20 PARCC states. 12 are taking the test this year. The others are not taking it this year. They're going to wait and see, I suppose, how we all do. And then they'll join on in a year. But they decided we're going to put it off for a year and see how it goes. But New Jersey's sticking with it, so we're going forward. The other states, like California, went to Smarter Balanced, which is a very similar test. You can even go on and look at the Smarter Balanced. What's the butter? Not that one, Smarter Balanced, whichever one's not the butter. If you go on that test, you can see practice questions. They're very similar, but they started earlier than we did. That they've already been doing it a couple of years. So right when Common Core came in, they moved to the test. They didn't, like we didn't change our test now. It's been a few years, 4 years, before we moved to the new test. And they moved right away. So there's 2 tests out there. And this is the one that New Jersey selected. We're all in it together here at the beginning. Go ahead.
For the writing portion, you said there's a rubric, you're going to score it that way. Who's scoring it? Who's grading it? And how do we know, like, how do I feel confident the person who's scoring my child's is being equally, is looking at them all the same?
Well, they are double scored. However, we don't know. I mean, it's a panel of people. They do solicit teachers. They ask for supervisors and people to volunteer for scoring. And they actually go down and they hand score them, which is why they're doing it in March. So the intent is that eventually we'll get them in June, but they have to score them all. Now, right now, we have the rubrics in place. It's the same rubric we've been scoring the students in class to get them used to the scoring. But they haven't set those, what's going to be a 1, what's going to be a 2 yet. They have this panel. There's like 14 people for each panel, and they meet to look at them, and then they do this whole inter-test reliability. So they're going to do this between March and July. They're going to do all of this to make sure they're all as valid as they can be, as closely related, and then they're going to give us the numbers of what the scores are and do the actual scoring. So, it's kind of unnerving knowing we don't know who they are. We know that they're educators and they're people that have signed on to test and actually hand score it, just like NJ asked. They're teachers and supervisors who actually hand score them. But there's going to be a dry run of the scoring until July, and then the real scoring July till October. We're not getting them until October this year. In the future, we won't need to do that dry run anymore. That's a good question. Let me see if I get anybody who I haven't asked yet. Go ahead. The back. You. Yeah.
Back on the whole typing issue and combining the question just asked, how is someone going to be able to judge a person who says, I don't think there's much typing going on in my 4th grader's life? Whether it's a once in a while kind of thing, nothing that's going to give him the confidence to be able to actually compose something that's going to be graded by whomever. So how can you compare someone who might be proficient and might be able to answer that question and is far more comfortable with a keyboard than someone? How can you judge a child at that point when typing is clearly not in the curriculum as a repetitive thing?
It's a great question. Absolutely, it's a great question. The more practice they can get, they're obviously more comfortable. Just as we as proficient, no, but I'm saying, the proficient, as adults, we're proficient typers, we can compose quickly. We know that that's going to be an issue in every school. And we have to take this test and get the best data that we can back, but I can't guarantee that it's not going to be an issue.
But there's no caveats for that. There's no kind of caveat for that. There's no allowance for such a wide spectrum of a kid who could be very proficient and half the class who couldn't. And
Because I know my kid would probably do great on paper, writing.
Right.
I'm telling her now, there's no way my son will ever finish what he
Then
needs to
throw on some
type.
anxiety issues
Yeah,
on
there's
top
no
of
way.
it.
But on
You've got a
paper.
problem
Well, the
with
best that we, I mean, unfortunately, this is what it is, and the best that we can do is really work with them to lower their anxiety. We're trying in class, we've all talked repeatedly to teachers, that we're really, and at home, we're telling them, do the best that you can. We're not expecting you to get every question right. It's the first time that we're doing this. We want you to try to use the skills that you've been learning in class and do the best that you can. The teachers are going to do their best to lower everyone's anxiety and just say, you know what, this is one glimpse. It's just a picture. It's on any other day, it's just a picture of your child. And we don't want a picture that looks all dolled up and glamorous, and we don't want a picture that looks like they close their eyes on picture day. We just want a shot on that day of what they're doing. And we're going to take it with everything else we know about your child as a picture. That's why we're not using it for, it's not, I know they keep saying high stakes. It's really for your child, there isn't the high stakes. I mean, it may be for us, who knows? It's stressful, and that's the high stake of it, but we're not using it to do anything that's going to say you're not getting into something because of what you do. But I know it's a concern. It's a concern for my sixth graders are a pretty good typer, but my fourth graders like this. And who knows? I have her get on there and write letters at home and just try to let her use it whenever she can. But I think this will come. It'll take a few years to get them typing the way that probably they can compose. I'm going to guess that majority of the kids in third grade across the state are in the same boat. But there probably are some proficient typers. But of my educator friends, it hasn't been a focus of schools. Like, it hasn't been the number one thing that they're working on,
Like part of the component of how they're.
It's part, and it hasn't been. And I can share your frustration that, we try to roll the information out as quickly as we're getting it, but it's sort of coming out in dribs and drabs, and any of you that are educators know that that's true. We're just getting it in pieces, and we're doing all the best we can to get the kids prepared. So we just focus on getting them the skills they need, and then the test will be.
Can I ask, has it ever been proposed that there's an option for a child to be able to take, and I totally understand we need to go onto the computer and it needs to be technologically based, but at least in the ramp up, okay, you feel more comfortable writing, well, now you know, next year you're going to have, this is your goal, but you can still write this and submit it if someone's actually physically sitting there going through it.
We do have a few students who just really have difficulty with the computer and that are taking on paper. But I would say the majority of students, most of them in the pilot liked it better. I mean, when they did it on there, they asked us afterwards, can we take all our tests this way? Just because they thought it was more like a game than the test. But I do realize anxiety, and it's there on our concern list, student anxiety about it. I mean, it's something we have to address.
You have criteria for identifying those kind of kids who are not capable of typing and who has difficulty in typing?
Well, I think all of them, they're not proficient typers. So we're talking about all of them are not proficient typers. So they're all in the same boat. But there are a few students who truly have disabilities that do not allow them to do that. And they're taking on paper or scribes.
And in line with the same question, are the class teachers, are the classes being prepared? They have enough tools and techniques to guide the children in taking up the test? Because last conference, when I asked the question, they were excluded. So I want to know if they are doing the due diligence in preparing the child. All we can do at home is making them sit and type in the laptop, but that's not all about the exam, right?
Well, they should know a lot more than they did in the fall, because we know a lot more in the fall. And it leads right into the next session, actually, because you're going to get a chance to go through the tutorial that the students go through and teach them how to use the tools. And they're learning that in computer class, and they're doing that in the classroom. So we're going to actually switch, and I am going to be here at the end to answer more questions, but we're going to go ahead and switch into the library and the computer lab. But at the end, please come back, or if you want to write on, I have some index cards if you want to write the questions. I know I haven't answered all of them, so I want to make...
Are they still doing the New Jersey app? The ones that did not pull up the park, are they still doing the New Jersey app? Or what are they doing?
They're doing whatever their state test was, and some of them didn't even have a state test. Of the 12 states that are taking part, half didn't even have open-ended ever. So they've never even written essays on any of their tests. It was just multiple choice. So imagine going from that to that essay. We're much better shape. But they're just not, they're either taking their state test or they're not taking it. I mean, whatever they did before, they're still doing.
No, she's talking, yeah, no, he's talking about.
That is correct. Yes. So the performance-based, even though it is open response and needs to be hand-scored, it is typed. So they will be typing their essays. They are allowed as much paper as they want. So if they have to write out the math problem on paper and then type in the answer, they can. They can write out an essay if they wanted to and then copy it if they had time. But, I think the biggest part for them is going to be getting used to composing, and that's what we're trying to work on in class, is composing at the computer. Because they're writing as they're thinking, and their typing is slower than they're thinking. And we realize that, and that's an issue, and we can write that up. I know an issue is the typing, and then we'll continue to work on that. We know they're not proficient typers. I think most third graders in the entire state are going to be in the same boat. That they can do faster than we think. They hunt and peck pretty quickly, but it is an issue that we have to think about in the future, that getting them ready for that. Yes?
Is spell check going to be an option for the kids?
The spell check is a universal option, although it doesn't give them anything, unless they can distinguish between a right and a wrong, they might not know. Like, it won't give them the dictionary, it just gives them the spell. That's a universal feature. They can do, and they can have the directions reread. Everybody can have the directions reread. In the past, the teachers couldn't go over to the student and kind of help them get them back on track, and they can now. You can help them get back to what the directions are and get focused. Other accommodations that we have, that things can be highlighted if your child was colorblind and we knew we can have it a certain color. We can change that. We can change the font size of the test so that students will be able to read it if they have difficulty seeing the words. So there's some, but there's a few universal that everyone gets. They don't have to worry about that one. Yes?
In long term, are they looking to replace the SAT and these other college tests that kids take with this? Or how does this?
What I have heard about other tests is that they're looking at having a variety of things that they will accept. Universities are becoming more open already, say taking ACT or SAT, different types of tests, but they're looking at this being one option. Whether students who take AP in high school may or may not in the future even have to take the PARCC. It could be one or the other. You take the AP test or you take the PARCC test. So they're looking at that. At this point, most of those exams are online now too. So we're kind of moving into those, but I don't know if they're going to replace it. I don't know if ETS is going to be willing to give up that stronghold, but we don't know. But I think that they're looking at a variety of tests to be used. Yes?
Third grade, there was parent review. They're doing writing a story in a school and one at home every week. Do they do that in a computer, like the story at home, or that's practice, or that's up to the teacher?
I think that as more information's come out, we're going to probably start to see more assignments. Almost everyone has access to computers at home. Not everyone does, so we have to be careful that, make sure that they have an opportunity to do it at school if they don't have it at home. However, the more practice you can get them, whether it's doing their reading journal online or writing letters to friends, it's just the thought process of composing. Just having your child sit down and write a story on the computer is helpful. Anything where they're having to, think while they're typing. And we'll continue. And our middle schoolers are pretty proficient at typing. I'm impressed at how much typing they actually do. Of course, our third, fourth, and fifth are very new at it. I'll tell you, our kindergartners are amazing at iPads. They can do things that nobody else can do. They just whip those things out. You don't have to tell them what to do. But, that age 3 through 5, typing's mediocre at best. Yes. Yes.
What is Dental's long-term goal of what you're going to be using the data for? You mentioned it would be used for placements for next year, but is that something that will never be used for placement? What will you use the data for?
I think that In the short term, in the long term, I'm not sure. When we see the quality of the data, we'll know what else we could do with it. For right now, what we really need it for is our differentiation of instruction in the classroom. That's what we're using the other programs that we purchased, like the Renaissance Star Math and Reading, the DRAs, the Teachers College Reading Assessments. Those things we're trying to get that information to tailor it. Right. We're moving away from that, from some of those, especially for GNT. Some of those, I mean, it is a piece of data if we look at a child needs to get into certain programs, but all of our identification processes are right now we're in the process of re-looking at. And our 4th PASS meeting will be on that gifted and talented. So if you're interested in enrichment programs, that's when we're going to get input from parents about looking at different ways of identifying students who need different programming. But right now, we're not using it. We don't know enough about the assessment and the quality of the assessment and the results yet to be able to say this is going to be the determiner, the determining factor to get into something. You know, maybe in the future, after doing it for a while and we feel like it's really valid, that we might. But that
for high school graduation.
it will. Right now, it may not be the only thing. There may be options. Like right now, they're looking at that you might be able to do a variety of things as long as you've done one of them, but that's all under discussion. But 3 graduating classes from now, it would be. Yes.
And although we didn't go through the first cycle of PARCC testing yet, like just as a building administrator here, you know, when we gave the NJAS testing, one of the things we always do with teacher in the September, October, when those cycles finally started coming out, the NJAS results, we started looking at the clusters of those content areas. So let's say it's ELA, we're talking about reading. Are we talking about working with text or analyzing text? Taking a look at my current class roster, where do they struggle most in terms of that snapshot? NJAS was a snapshot in terms of their achievement on that test. As the building principal, my dreamy, lofty vision would be that when these PARCC results come, we do something similar with the teachers in the fall, because they are supposed to come out in the fall of 2015. But I think what this has more promise with those score reports is, like Dr. Coles was saying, it's breaking it down more by specific standard. When you're taking a look at what analyzing text means, and you go to the original core curriculum content standards, analyzing text span about, I venture, probably 20 standards. But we never knew exactly what was about analyzing text that our children struggled in. But this hopefully will give us a little bit more even detailed information for our teachers so that they can guide the instruction accordingly for their classes. That's my dream. That's my goal.
I mean, it does, you know, for your child you get information, but it does tell us a lot that we have things we need to do. I mean, our overall goal, our end goal, is that we be able to do more differentiation in the classroom, that we be able to tailor programming more to your child. It's just the way of the world now. It's just becoming more individualized, that this child needs this, they don't need this. So we're not going to spend a month teaching them something they already know. They need to be doing something else. And that's a shift in education that we're anxious to do, because I see it I mean, there's 20 students in a class and they're totally different. Their needs are different. And if I just give them the exact same thing every day, it's not going to meet all of their needs. That's the lofty goal. Yes?
The computers that we saw, the laptop, would that be the one that you will be using for your testing?
Yes.
So let's say if we want to practice at home, we should give them the laptop and not the desktop or a keyboard. They'll be using the laptop.
They are more likely to use the laptop. I mean, it's the laptops. They all will get a mouse, whether they use it or not. Some of the students just like to use the pad on the front, but some like a mouse. So they all have a mouse available to them, and they all have headphones, because one of the accommodations that is open to everybody is that if they need the directions reread, they just click on it and it reads it to them. Or if there's a pronunciation, they can just click on it and reads it to them. Everybody has, actually, I don't think they're buds, I think they're ears. They're big, yes. They don't have a privacy wall. If a student needed it because they felt they were going to be distracted, we can provide one. As far as the computers themselves, the questions are not in the same order. So they're all in different places.
They told us that everyone's going to have a privacy wall because the computers are right next to each other.
Oh, then they may not realize that. We don't, because this is something that we just found out the last week at the assessment, is that they're not in the same order. The questions aren't in the same order.
They did tell us.
What?
know, but for distraction.
Okay,
Can I speak to that?
yes, sure.
I'm very fortunate that at Riverview School,
Oh, you
we
have
did
them.
field test here last year. We were chosen, 2 of our 5th grade classes were chosen to do the field test in math, which was fantastic. Not that I saw the test, I didn't see the test, but I saw how the kids were arranged, how they were responding to things. And one of the things that we did in each of the 5th grade classes, I mean, they were, the teachers were great. They even strategically set up like, semicircle this way or semicircle this way. So even in which they were positioned around, they had very limited visibility to it. I mean, a couple of them did use growls, kids who we knew that would be, a little bit distracted who had to take it within that classroom, but they spread out the kids enough so that they weren't seeing the screen, and the questions were in a different order. So they weren't even seeing whatever it was that they were working on the computer on somebody else's screen.
But she literally just told us in there that everyone was gonna have.
Well, they may have the option. I mean, they may all have one, but they don't have to use it. I mean, it's not required. I mean, I don't think we're worried about cheating in any way. I think that distracting other students or being distracted, but they're available. I mean, but you don't have to use one, I don't think, if they don't want one. Maybe they had already talked about that that's what they wanted to do in their class. I'm not sure
This was
about
the
that.
vice principal in the.
And maybe Mr. Scala said they decided he's talking to staff and they all want to use them or something. It's not required. It's not required. That's what I'm saying, it's not required that they have to use one.
I know.
And he said it is required?
She just said she.
Oh, I thought you said, I'm sorry, Tina. I thought you said Mr. Scala, because I think Mr. Scala's in there too, the other vice principal. I apologize. So maybe at Riverview, you guys are going to use it. We'll talk about that. It's optional. That'll be okay. Yes?
Are these scores going to be used in our teacher evaluations now or in the future? And how much time during the regular class day are we using to prepare for these tests rather than teaching curriculum?
They are part of teacher evaluations once the teacher has had more than 20 students. So for elementary, they have to have a few years. If they have class sizes that are testing under 20, then it takes a few years before they get a group of students. So you have to have more than 20 results for it to count towards your evaluation. It does count for 10% of their evaluation, but how that works out is that they take all of the growth scores. So that means the difference between where they were the year before to where they are now. It puts them in rank order and it picks the middle. And then that's the teacher's score. So what we see is that if they had a lot of growth from 3rd grade to 4th grade, then the scores will cluster up higher, and then the teacher median's higher, and that's 10% of their evaluation. If the students had less growth from 3rd to 4th, or any grade, 3rd to 4th grade, then the scores cluster lower and the median's lower. It's not an average, and it's 10%. I mean, we figured out it all different ways, especially for this first year, because there's a lot of anxiety with the teachers to see how this would be when we have not given the test. And if their practice is strong, because that 90% is their practice, their contributions to school, their professional development, and so forth, that the impact is 10%. It's much smaller than, I mean, they don't come out to be unaffected.
It was 30. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It was 30%.
Yes.
Originally, the previous results from last year. So the state lowered that percent towards teachers' evaluation to 10% for this first year of implementation.
Just to be clear, when you said their practice, that's not practicing for the test.
Oh, I'm sorry. Their practices, meaning they're teaching, their observations. Thank you for clarifying that. Their observations that we go in and conduct formal observations, that along with their goals that they set for their students and their professional responsibilities and so forth, that makes up 90% of their thing. And that only is for teachers that have more than 20 students testing, and in middle school, only those that are with language arts and math. The rest of the students have individual goals for their students that they have to meet. The second question was the amount of time in class. All of preparing for the assessments, it's different than in the past because everything that they do is Common Core related. These are the standards they are supposed to meet. So every day of instruction should be geared to the standards. There really is no trick to passing this. I mean, because the questions, this first one is mostly open-ended, so it isn't really like we're test besting or teaching them little tricks to remember. It's really they have to be confident and know the standards, the skills that they have been doing. So for like elementary school, we do Readers and Writers Workshop. They have been doing those skills all the way along. The unit of review that we're doing now is just looking over those skills that they have already taught and bringing them into new pieces. Like how do you do that with a flash draft, an on-demand piece? But we're not setting aside. Now I know the parents have showed me, and I've been told that sometimes there's an assignment that says PARCC assignment. I have asked them, and moving forward, I said, it's not for PARCC, because I'm not preparing my students for PARCC. I am not here every day, and those teachers are not here, and the administrators are not here for PARCC. I don't work for Pearson or any of that. We're here to teach the Common Core standards and get our kids ready for eventually college and career. This is the assessment, this is the end piece to see how we're doing. But this is not, it should not be, we're getting ready for this test, because that anxiety, the kids don't need the anxiety, and the teachers themselves don't need that anxiety, and we're not putting that anxiety saying that. It's the first time, we're all in this together, the first time through it, and we're asking the kids to just do the best that they can. Do the best that you can, show us what you can do. But it is a picture, and I just want a real picture. I don't want a glammed up picture that's all fancy for the day that's not real, and I don't want a picture with the kid's eyes closed. You know, what does the person look like? It's one shot combined with everything else that we do, and that's what we hope for. Yes?
When will we find out the exact days of the test, and at what time during the day will the test be administered?
The test is administered it's the first couple of hours of school, so depending on which school you're in, it either starts at 7:30, no, 8:30 or 9, basically. 8:30 or 9 are when they start. And the first week of March is 3rd grade and 6th grade. The second week of March is 4th grade and 7th grade. And the third week of March is 4th and 8th. I'm sorry. Thanks. 5th and 8th. It's all on the website too, if you forget, you didn't write it down. The test dates are on the website too, under academics. Yes?
Just confirming, so for the 6th graders, there won't be any NJ ask, you just have this.
They do not have any NJ ask. 4th and 8th grade will take the one-day science test, exactly the same as they have for a decade. Same one, just 4th and 8th though, and it's one day, May 27th. Questions. These are great questions. Yes?
Now, I know there's not a lot of test prep per se, and you're saying you're testing to the core, which is fine, but a lot of that innate, like, figuring out, answering the question, and then typing it in as they're going, has there been any of that, or is it just typing classes we're giving the kids?
There are some tutorials on the tools, like you saw, and some typing. But we are looking at, like again, in this Readers and Writers workshop, we just worked on this unit today with 4th grade. And it does go through, listen, this is the kind of skills that they would have to be able to do this task. So we're going through and teaching those points. But this is the same skill if they are ever asked to write a literary essay. They need to know the structure. They need to know the vocab that goes with that. So in preparing, we are telling them those things. Here's the vocabulary words you need to know. If they ask you to compare and contrast, this means this is what we're doing. If it asks you to do personification, what does that mean?
Yeah, but I'm saying literally, like, okay, here, answer this question and type it out on the...
They are doing practice tests. The practice test that you did. Is that what you mean? And we are also, in language arts, we're doing flash drafts where they're composing.
No, well, you were just saying that you're not doing a lot of test prep, but are you physically doing, like, literature or English classes on the computer so that the kids are just getting used to typing into the computer answers to questions?
Yes, we are. And when I meant by test prep, I guess, it's not like test besting where we're sitting in there saying, okay, this is for PARCC, and we're going to learn how to answer. The answer is always C if you don't know it. Not those types of things. But yes, getting familiar with the format, we are. We're showing them the benchmarks that we do in-house, that we wrote, are similar to the samples that you would see on the website. Like we made them to be, although they were writing them at the beginning of the year and now typing them, they're designed to be the same kinds of research tasks, like read 3 pieces, 3 articles, because that's part of our regular instruction, because that's one of the things they have to do. But we are doing those types of tasks that are similar to the ones that they'll see on the test.
I can tell you, my son and my daughter are in 4th and 8th grade, and many of their homework assignments are required to be typed. I noticed that a lot more this year than last year. I'm just saying, as a dad of two kids, 4th and 8th, I see my son typing things that I didn't see him doing before, and my daughter basically typing everything. My kids go to these schools too, so.
I have a 4th grader, a 6th grader, and a 7th grader, and I can tell you that last year they were doing so much more typing on the computer, and this year, not really anything. There's no spelling on there. I know they're not learning spelling, but last year at least they had 4 days where they were writing sentences, different color fonts. There's nothing. And my children go to Lakeview and Valley View, and they are frustrated because there is none.
They don't do their homework on the computer?
They do not.
Neither does my 4th grader, we go to school.
So my children are very upset because they feel they have not had typing. This goes back to when they first started this school and they were coming home with these pictures from the computer class and they were not learning typing. So I don't know.
Well, I'm sure that we could talk after and look into individual things of why certain places it's occurring and not in others, for sure. I mean, it should be consistently around. I mean, we have a large staff and we're working closely with everybody to get everybody doing Common Core, but if there are differences in practice, we surely would like to know. Any other questions? Yes?
For the written evaluation, is like spelling and capital letters and punctuation, is that all part of the evaluation?
For the PDA, for the student?
Yeah.
It is one of the pieces. Conventions is a piece of the rubric, but it is not the majority of the score. Most of the score is on structure and development of the idea, which is what we spend an incredible amount of time on. Our whole elementary program is about developing the ideas and how you grow ideas, and that's really what most of the points are for.
And where spelling, punctuation, and capitalization come in, it's where is the piece are those things impacting the meaning of the piece? So if I'm reading the piece, does that impede my ability to understand what is being written? It's not really being looked at in isolation, all right, there are 3 spelling errors, or 4. It's not like that. It's just does it impact the delivery of the understanding that I have of that piece while I'm reading it? So that's where that is within the application of the rubric.
Okay.
Good question. Yes?
Quick question, when you said about the headphones, about they can actually re-listen to the instructions, does that mean the actual teacher in the room is going to explain them first? Or
No.
Or they
Read them. They read the directions themselves.
They won't do it all themselves? Okay.
There are directions the teacher gives, just like when we used to do paper standardized tests, there's things that they would read, and they will read that to the student, but it's printed on above the questions. Because now they're really going to be going, they're given that entire time to do one task, where before it was kind of broken up into, there's 15 questions, we all stop. 10 questions, we all stop. Now you have the whole time, and if you need most of your time to read and less to write, or even reading and writing, you're given that time. And the one thing that teachers can do that they couldn't in the past is to redirect students. So if they see them, losing focus, they can come back and get them back. Before, they really weren't supposed to have any interaction as far as that with the students.
And also, in addition to going back and reading directions, you may have seen it in the computer lab, when the kids have the opportunity to watch a video clip, they can go back and see any portion of the video clip again as well. So when if you go on one of those social studies sites that's on the list of resources that you got in the computer lab, and there's some kind of a video, they should know at that bottom that play bar, that they can scroll it back to the point where they want to watch it again and play on from that point. So it's very similar to a video too, because that could be used as, say, part of the research simulation task or something else on the ELAs. But they can go back and rewatch part of the video.
Yes. Yes.
When they take the test, like they go in Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and they do it all in the morning, particularly when they get up to the middle school level, are they sitting in the same seats at the same computer, or are they going to be subject to switching around?
Every day they have to be in the same place. They have to use the same computer. We have the laptops that we have. It backs up the questions, so that if anything were to happen, it actually backs up the questions. The most they could possibly lose is 2, if we lose any, and then they can get right back to it. If we didn't, it doesn't back it up. So we just have them on the same computer, that's assigned to them for the week. They can have breaks if they need breaks, you know, they can get up and move if they need to and get a drink.
You mean it's backing up while they're taking the
It
test?
is.
So say the electricity goes out, then it will only be up to 2 questions that they have.
Correct. So it actually backs up 2 ways. We do something called proctor caching. We cache the test, which means that we have it here, they're accessing it through our server, so that it's not like 400 people logging on at once. And that's one way, and it backs it up continually. And then the other is that on our laptops it's backing it up too. So, yes? They're reading the questions, but if they want it repeated, they can click on it, and it will, there's a tool on there, they can click on it. The other tools they can do are, if you remember we used to well, you probably saw there, you can flag questions that you want to go back to, you can highlight things that you want to highlight. Again, there's a limited amount of paper, so they could write whatever they need to on paper and transfer it to. No.
No, right?
Does not read the passage. All of the tasks are testing both reading and writing. So there's a reading, and then there's a few multiple choice questions that get them to think about what they just read, like what's the main idea, what's the theme, what does this vocab word mean, and then they write an essay about it. That's how that works. We're going to now break up into the Conversation Cafe. So before you go, I want to thank everyone for coming. But if I haven't answered your questions or we haven't, we're going to be here to answer questions as long as you have questions. You can also email me. My email and contacts are right on the agenda. You can find me at the website. There is a PARCC info. So if you go to academics, there's PARCC info. There's parent guides on there for the Common Core. There's practice test link. There will be tomorrow the refusal procedures. You know, all of that will be on there. But please, if you have any, it's under academics on the website. On the website it says academics, and then it says PARCC info. Just click on that on the website, and it has information for you. But hopefully we've been able to answer any of your questions. But if you still have issues or concerns, or you think of more when you go home, please just contact us, because we want to give you as much information so that you can make the decisions that you need to. Okay. So we'll be here to answer questions, but there are snacks there, plenty of cookies and things left, so please feel free to get them, and you can talk with each other or us. We'll be around the room.